In the dimly lit sanctum of the urban cathedral, Reverend William Castellanos stood before his modest congregation, his voice a solemn echo amidst the vaulted ceilings. His eyes searched the rows of faces, seeking the solace that eluded him in the quiet confines of his own quarters. Each week he delivered his sermons with unflagging devotion, yet he remained an enigma to his flock, a solitary figure at the pulpit whose heart was a fortress unto itself. The congregation of St. Sebastian's was a motley assembly of souls drawn from the fabric of the sprawling city beyond its doors. Yet it was the innocent gaze of a young girl named Evelyn that pierced through William's loneliness. Her affection was a beacon, a warmth that seemed to thaw the ice around his heart. Yet it was a bond that transcended the sacred confines of the church, hinting at a connection that was both profound and profane. "Let us bow our heads in prayer," William intoned, his rich baritone resonating through the hallowed space. He felt her eyes upon him, a gentle pressure that seemed to urge him to cast aside his burdens. "Dear Lord, we come before you today, seeking your guidance in the trials we face. In the solitude of our hearts, may we find the strength to carry on." As the congregation murmured their amens, William's thoughts drifted to the precarious precipice upon which he found himself. His dedication to the cloth had been unwavering since his ordination, yet the touch of human companionship remained a distant dream. His days were spent in study and contemplation, his nights in solitude. The church was his bastion, his sanctuary from the world's tumult. The service concluded, the worshippers shuffled out into the cacophony of the city streets, leaving William in the empty church. It was in these moments that the weight of his solitude was most profound. The silence was a cocoon that both comforted and suffocated him. "Reverend Castellanos," a soft voice called from the shadows. It was Evelyn, her eyes a deep blue that seemed to hold the secrets of the universe. She approached with a tread so light it seemed almost ethereal. "I wanted to ask you about the sermon today." "Of course, my dear," William replied, his smile genuine yet guarded. "What is it that troubles your soul?" "I fear I am lost," she whispered, her youthful features etched with the pain of an old soul. "I seek a light in the darkness, a guiding hand." Her vulnerability was a siren's call to his loneliness, and he found himself drawn to her, his heart aching with an emotion he had long buried. "Evelyn," he began, his tone a gentle reprimand, "you must have faith that the Lord will guide you through your trials." "But what if my trials are of the heart?" she asked, her gaze unwavering. "What if the darkness I feel is not of the soul, but of the flesh?" The question hung in the air, a palpable tension that seemed to crackle with the electricity of the forbidden. William felt his resolve waver, the boundaries that had so long defined his existence blurring before him. "Your heart is pure," he said, his voice a whisper. "Do not let the whispers of the world corrupt you." "But what if it is the whispers of the world that I crave?" she replied, taking a step closer. Her scent was intoxicating, a bouquet of innocence and a hint of something more primal. "What if the embrace I seek is not divine but human?" He stared at her, the conflict within him raging like a tempest. "You speak in riddles," he said, his voice strained. "The path of the flesh is fraught with peril." Evelyn reached out, her hand trembling as it touched his. "I do not wish to be lost," she murmured. "I wish to be found." Her touch was like a flame to dry tinder, igniting a passion within William that he had thought long extinguished. He looked into her eyes, seeing in them a reflection of his own yearning. "Evelyn," his voice barely above a whisper, "you must understand the gravity of what you're asking." "I am but a vessel for the desires of my soul," she replied, her eyes never leaving his. "And my soul yearns for a connection that transcends the boundaries of the spirit." William felt his resolve crumbling like the ancient stones of the cathedral beneath their feet. He knew the path they were treading was one of temptation and potential ruin. Yet the pull of her proximity was too strong to resist. He took her hand in his, feeling the warmth of her skin and the pulse of life within her. "If it is companionship you seek, I can offer you guidance and counsel," he said, his grip tightening ever so slightly. "But the flesh is weak, and we must not succumb to its desires." Her smile was both innocent and knowing, a contradiction that unfurled in his chest like a dark bloom. Is it not within your power to offer more than mere words, Reverend? She asked, her voice a siren's call. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken longing. The candles flickered, casting shadows that danced upon the walls of the sanctum, as if the very angels themselves were torn by the gravity of the moment. Evelyn, he began, his voice hoarse with the struggle within him. The vows I have taken are sacred. To break them would be to forsake all that I am. Her gaze never wavered. But what if those vows are the very chains that keep you from truly experiencing the divine? The air was charged with an energy that neither could ignore. William felt the walls of his fortress crumbling around him, the solitary life he had built for himself threatening to come tumbling down. Your innocence is a gift, he said, his voice a plea. Do not throw it away lightly. It is not innocence that I wish to cast aside, she replied, her eyes searching his. It is the loneliness that has become my shroud. Her words resonated within him, striking a chord that had lain dormant for years. The weight of his solitude, the unfulfilled longing that he had buried beneath his vestments, suddenly seemed unbearable. Let us pray, he said, his voice trembling with the effort to maintain his composure. Let us seek the will of the Lord in this matter. Together they knelt before the altar, their hands joined in a silent supplication. Yet as their eyes met, the unspoken understanding grew stronger, the barriers between them dissolving like mist in the early morning light. Their prayers became whispers of doubt and need, their breaths mingling as one. William knew he was on the cusp of a choice that would alter the course of his life, a choice that would either save or damn his soul. Perhaps, Evelyn murmured, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears, the true test of our faith is not in denying ourselves, but in embracing the love that is offered to us, even if it comes in an unconventional form. Her words struck at the very core of William's being, challenging the very foundations upon which he had constructed his life. He closed his eyes, the weight of his decision a burden that threatened to crush him. When he opened them again, he knew what he must do. He chose her over the church. The gravity of his decision bore down upon him, a profound realization that the path he had so meticulously laid out was no longer the one he was destined to follow. The sacred vows that had once been his shield now felt like the very chains that held him in bondage. Evelyn, he said, his voice steady yet filled with an uncharacteristic warmth, you speak with the wisdom of the ages and the courage of the faithful. Her eyes searched his, seeking reassurance, finding in him the answer she had hoped for. Reverend, she said, her voice trembling, are you certain? My dear, he replied, taking her hands in his, I am certain that I wish to walk beside you in this life, to share in your joys and your sorrows, to offer you the warmth and companionship that I have so long denied myself. Her smile grew, a radiant expression that seemed to fill the sanctum with a light that outshone the flickering candles. Then let us leave this place, she whispered. Let us find our salvation in the world beyond these walls. The decision was made, and with it, William felt a sense of liberation that was both terrifying and exhilarating. He knew the consequences of his actions would be severe, the whispers of scandal and the judgments of his peers inevitable. Yet as he stood before the altar, holding the hand of the woman who had captured his heart, he could not bring himself to regret his choice. They rose together, their eyes locked in a silent pact. The sanctity of the cathedral was no longer a prison, but a testament to the power of love and the boundless nature of divine will. I shall make the necessary arrangements, William said, his voice firm. We shall leave this place and forge a new life, a life that honors the love we have found. Evelyn nodded, her eyes shining with hope. And what of your faith? She asked, her voice trembling with anticipation. My faith, he replied, has not wavered. It has merely been refined by the fires of doubt and desire. I shall find a new way to serve the Lord, one that does not deny the very essence of what it is to be human. Together they stepped into the shadowy aisle, their footsteps echoing through the empty cathedral. The grandeur of the space seemed to shrink around them, becoming a mere backdrop to the monumental shift in their lives. Your place is not in the pulpit, but by my side, Evelyn said, her voice filled with conviction. Together, we shall find our purpose. And together, William vowed, we shall face the trials that lie ahead. As they walked into the encroaching night, the cathedral's doors closing softly behind them, they knew that their journey had only just begun. The road ahead was fraught with peril and uncertainty, but in each other they had found a light that could not be extinguished. The whispers of the city enveloped them, a cacophony of life that mirrored the tumult within their own hearts. Yet amidst the chaos, they found a strange peace, a certainty that the path they had chosen was the one they were meant to tread. In the days that followed, William's decision sent ripples through the congregation of St. Sebastian's. Some mourned the loss of their beloved reverend, while others whispered of his fall from grace. Yet within the sanctity of their newfound union, William and Evelyn found refuge from the storm. Their love was not sanctioned by the church, nor was it understood by many of those who had once called William their spiritual leader. Yet it was a love that burned with an intensity that neither could have imagined, a flame that consumed all else in its path. In the quiet moments when the world outside seemed to fade away, William would gaze into Evelyn's eyes and find the peace he had sought for so long. In her embrace, he discovered a faith that transcended doctrine and dogma, a faith that was rooted in the very essence of love itself. Their days were filled with the mundane and the profound, the laughter of shared moments and the quiet contemplation of their newfound freedom. Each sunrise brought with it a sense of rebirth, a reminder that their love had set them free from the shackles of their former lives. The whispers of the city grew louder, the judgments more pronounced, but William and Evelyn remained steadfast in their convictions. They knew that their path was not one of ease, but of growth and discovery. They faced each challenge with the grace of those who had found something greater than themselves, a bond that could not be broken by the opinions of others. In the quiet of their shared dwelling, William would often read to Evelyn from the very text that had once governed his existence. They dissected the ancient words with new eyes, finding within them a message of love and compassion that resonated with their hearts. "You see, my love," William would say, his voice filled with a warmth that seemed to emanate from the pages themselves. "It is not the structure of the church that is divine, but the love that it is meant to embody." Evelyn would nod, her eyes alight with understanding. "Then we shall be our own church," as she would reply, her voice filled with quiet strength. "We shall worship in the temple of our hearts." Their nights were sacred, a time for exploration and passion that transcended the confines of their earthly existence. In each other, they found a sanctuary from the storm, a bastion of warmth in a world that often seemed cold and unforgiving. As the seasons turned, so too did the tide of public opinion. Some of William's former congregation came to accept his choice, seeing in his love for Evelyn a reflection of the divine love he had so often preached. Others remained steadfast in their condemnation, unable to reconcile their own beliefs with the reality of his happiness. Through it all, William and Evelyn remained devoted to one another, a testament to the power of love to conquer all. They grew stronger together, their bond a beacon of hope in a world that often seemed shrouded in darkness. In the quiet of the evening, as the candles flickered and their hearts beat as one, William would often speak of his fears and his doubts. "What if we have made a mistake?" he would ask, his voice heavy with the weight of his former life. "My love," Evelyn would reply, placing a gentle hand upon his cheek, "we have not made a mistake. We have merely chosen a different path, one that honors the sanctity of our hearts and the truth of our souls." The months passed swiftly, filled with the sweetness of shared moments and the bitterness of the world's rejection. Yet in each other, William and Evelyn found a sanctuary that could not be breached by the judgments of others. Their union grew stronger with each passing day, a bastion of love amidst the cacophony of the world outside. Their happiness was a balm to William's soul, a salve to the loneliness that had once consumed him. Yet as the calendar pages turned, an insidious shadow began to creep into their lives. Evelyn grew pale, her once vibrant spirit waning like the flame of a candle in the wind. Her eyes, those deep pools of blue that had once been so full of life, grew cloudy with pain and confusion. "What ails you, my dear?" William asked, his voice filled with concern as he held her frail form in his arms. "It is nothing, my love," she assured him, her smile a valiant attempt to conceal her suffering. But the truth was something far more sinister. Evelyn had been diagnosed with cancer, a disease that ravaged her body with a swiftness that left them both reeling. The months that followed were a blur of doctors' appointments, treatments, and prayers offered in the quiet solace of their home. William watched helplessly as the woman he loved was slowly consumed by the very same darkness he had once feared for his own soul. Her strength, her unshakable faith, became his anchor in the storm. Her pain was his pain, her fears his own. Yet in the face of the inevitable, he found himself unable to offer the solace that she so desperately needed. "Why, my love?" he whispered, his eyes brimming with tears as he held her hand in the sterile confines of the hospital room. "Why must you bear this burden?" "It is not a burden," she replied, her voice a mere whisper. "It is a testament to the fleeting nature of life, a reminder to cherish each moment we are given." Her words were a balm to his tortured soul, a gentle reprimand that he was not permitted to succumb to despair. The weeks grew shorter, the days a blur of pain and hope. Yet through it all, William remained steadfast, his love for Evelyn a beacon that guided him through the darkest of nights. "We shall conquer this," he assured her, his voice trembling with the force of his conviction. Yet as the days turned to weeks, and the weeks to months, the reality of the situation grew more apparent. The cancer had spread, a relentless tide that no amount of medicine could hold back. "I am afraid," she confessed, her eyes searching his. "Do not be," he said, his voice strong despite the tremor of fear that gripped his heart. "For I shall be with you always." And so in the cold embrace of a hospital bed, Evelyn slipped away from the world, her final breath a whispered promise of eternal love. The funeral was a somber affair, the cathedral that had once been William's sanctuary, now a stark reminder of the life he had left behind. The very walls seemed to echo with the absence of her laughter, the absence of her warmth. As he stood before the mourners, their eyes filled with pity and accusation, William knew that his path had led him to this moment. The loneliness that had once been his constant companion had returned, a specter that haunted his every waking hour. "My dear Evelyn," he began, his voice shaking with grief, "you were the light in my darkness, the warmth in my solitude. In the brief time we were granted together, you taught me the true meaning of faith, of love, and of life itself." The silence was profound, a testament to the depth of their connection. "Though she has left this mortal coil," he continued, "I know that her spirit lives on, a beacon of hope that guides me still." The congregation listened, some with heads bowed in respect, others with accusation in their gazes. Yet William felt no shame, only the stark reality of his loss and the profound lesson it had imparted. In the face of adversity, he concluded, his voice strong despite the ache in his heart, "Let us remember the power of love, for it is in the embrace of one another that we truly find the divine." The service concluded with a hymn, the haunting melody carrying the weight of their shared sorrow. As the last notes faded away, William stepped down from the pulpit, feeling the finality of their union. The days that followed were a blur of grief and introspection. The cathedral that had been the center of his world now felt like an empty shell, a monument to a life he had once known. The whispers of his former congregation grew distant, replaced by the echoes of Evelyn's voice in his thoughts. In the quiet of his quarters, William found refuge in the memories they had shared. Her laughter, her wisdom, her gentle touch, each recollection a dagger to his soul, yet also a balm that soothed his unbearable pain. He knew that he could not remain in the church, not as a priest who had so publicly defied its laws. Yet he also knew that he could not abandon the faith that had shaped his very essence. In the depths of his sorrow, William found a new calling. He would leave the clergy, but not the teachings of Christ. He would dedicate his life to helping those who suffered, offering them the compassion and love that Evelyn had shown him. The decision was not an easy one, fraught with the weight of his past and the uncertainty of his future. Yet as he packed his meager belongings, he felt a peace that had long eluded him. The final act of his priesthood was a letter to the Vatican, a confession of his love for Evelyn and his intention to leave the church. It was a declaration of his faith in a love that transcended the boundaries of doctrine, a faith that had been tested and emerged stronger for it. The response was swift and unforgiving. He was stripped of his title and excommunicated from the very institution that had been his home for so long. Yet in the face of such rejection, William felt a sense of liberation that was both terrifying and exhilarating. He stepped out into the world, a man adrift in the sea of humanity, his heart heavy with loss, but also buoyed by the hope that had been rekindled by his love for Evelyn. The city had changed, or perhaps it was he who had changed.